Millionaire invites ex-wife to his wedding to shame her, but she stuns him with an unbelievable. The sleek black envelope arrived on a crisp October morning, nestled between utility bills and a catalogue from Williams-Sonoma. Clara Bennett nearly missed it as she sorted through the stack at her kitchen counter, sunlight streaming through the bay windows of her Brooklyn Heights apartment. But the gilded edges caught her eye, and she paused, her fingers hesitating over the elegant script embossed across the front. Elliot Grayson and Sophia Reed request the honor of your presence at their wedding. For a moment the world seemed to still. Clara blinked, rereading the names. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. Elliot Grayson, her ex-husband, the man who had once promised her the world before casting her aside in his pursuit of power, was marrying again, and he wanted her there to witness it. Her first instinct was to toss the invitation in the trash, but curiosity tugged at her. Clara sat down at the marble-topped kitchen island, the envelope still in her hand. She traced her fingers over the embossed letters, memories flooding back like a dam had burst. They had met during their junior year at Boston University, where Clara had been a literature major with dreams of becoming a writer, and Elliot was an ambitious business student with an eye for startups. He'd swept her off her feet with his charm and unrelenting determination. Clara could still picture the small Italian bistro, Trattoria di Monica, where they'd had their first date in Boston's North End. Elliot had been late, caught up in a meeting with his tech co-founder, but he'd arrived with flowers from a street vendor and an apology that seemed to erase the frustration. "I promise you," he had said over a shared plate of tiramisu, "one day we'll have everything we've ever dreamed of. You'll have the freedom to write your novels, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything." But that promise had come with a price. As Elliot's ambitions grew, so did the distance between them. Late nights turned into missed dinners, and Clara's dreams of writing were pushed aside to support his relentless pursuit of success. Their marriage had unraveled like a poorly tied knot. By the time Elliot's company, Grayson Enterprises, had secured its first multi-million-dollar deal, Clara felt like a ghost in her own life. The man she had fallen in love with had been consumed by his hunger for wealth and status. The final straw had come during a heated argument when Elliot dismissed her writing as a hobby that wasn't worth investing time in. When the divorce papers arrived, Clara had signed them without hesitation. She had walked away with little more than her dignity and a burning determination to rebuild her life. And rebuild she did. Clara poured herself into her work, founding Bright Horizons, a non-profit that provided literacy programs for underserved communities. Over time, her small organization grew into a nationally recognized initiative. Clara stared at the invitation, her mind reeling. Why would Elliot want her at his wedding? It felt less like an olive branch and more like a calculated move. Knowing him, it probably was. He thrived on appearances, and what better way to flaunt his new life than by inviting the woman he had left behind? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Naomi Carter. "Naomi, brunch tomorrow? You need to spill the tea on that gala last week." Clara typed a quick reply. "Sure, and I have something even juicier to tell you." As she set her phone down, Clara made a decision. She would go to the wedding, not for Elliot, but for herself. She wanted to see with her own eyes the life he thought was better than the one they'd shared. And perhaps, just perhaps, she'd remind him that she wasn't the same woman he had underestimated. That night, Clara opened her laptop and began researching Elliot's fiancée, Sophia Reed. A quick Google search revealed dozens of articles and Instagram posts about the it-girl socialite. Sophia was stunning, with a penchant for designer brands like Dior and Gucci, and a flawless feed filled with exotic vacations and red carpet appearances. Clara smirked. "Of course," she muttered under her breath. But as she scrolled further, something about Sophia's polished perfection seemed hollow. Clara leaned back in her chair, her thoughts turning to her wardrobe. If she was going to attend this spectacle, she needed to make an impression, and she knew just the designer to call: Christian Siriano. The first chapter ends with Clara dialing a number, determination sparking in her eyes. "Hi, Megan. It's Clara Bennett. I need a dress. Something unforgettable." The steady hum of conversation and clinking cutlery filled the air as Clara walked into Bluebird London, her favorite brunch spot overlooking Columbus Circle. The chic interior, with its sleek navy blue booths and brass fixtures, was the perfect backdrop for New York's elite to sip mimosas and trade gossip. But Clara wasn't here for gossip, not entirely. Naomi Carter waved her over, a radiant smile lighting up her face. Her auburn curls framed her sharp features, and her emerald green blazer matched her vibrant personality. Naomi had been Clara's rock through the tumultuous years of her divorce, always ready with a bottle of wine or a well-timed reality check. "Over here, darling," Naomi called, raising her glass of Prosecco. Clara slid into the booth opposite her, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You always manage to make me feel like I'm walking into an episode of Sex and the City." Naomi laughed, raising her glass in a toast. "What can I say? I'm a classic Samantha with a hint of Miranda. Now spill. You said you had something juicy, and I've been dying to know all morning." Clara hesitated, glancing at the menu before setting it down. She reached into her purse and pulled out the sleek black invitation, sliding it across the table. Naomi's eyes widened as she picked it up. "Elliot," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough to draw a few curious glances. "That smug bastard invited you to his wedding. What's his game?" Clara shrugged, leaning back in her seat. "I've been trying to figure that out myself. He doesn't do anything without a reason." Naomi's eyes narrowed as she scanned the invitation. "Sophia Reed? Isn't she that socialite who hosted that charity gala at the plaza last year? I remember reading about her in Vogue. Looks like Elliot's trying to upgrade his image." Clara smirked, though there was no humor in it. "It's not like he needs to. His company's valuation hit the billions last year. He's got everything he ever wanted: money, power, a trophy fiancé. And now he wants me to see it." Naomi set the invitation down with a sharp tap. "So what are you going to do? Ignore it? Send a strongly worded letter? Hire a skywriter to tell him to go to hell?" "I'm going," Clara said, her voice calm but firm. Naomi blinked, momentarily stunned. "You're serious?" Clara nodded. "It's not about him. It's about me. I need to see for myself that I'm past all of it, that he doesn't have power over me anymore. Besides—" She paused, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "I wouldn't mind showing him what he gave up." Naomi leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now that's the Clara I know. Okay, if you're going to do this, you need to go all in. No half measures. What's the plan?" The two women spent the next hour crafting a strategy that felt more like preparing for a battle than attending a wedding. Naomi sipped her Prosecco thoughtfully as Clara outlined her ideas. "First," Clara began, "I need a dress. Not just any dress. A showstopper. I'm thinking Christian Siriano, or maybe something custom from Oscar de la Renta." Naomi nodded approvingly. "Good start. You need to remind everyone in that room, including Elliot, that you're a force to be reckoned with." "Second," Clara continued, "I'll arrive with someone, not to make Elliot jealous. That's not the point. But to show him that I've moved on, that I'm not dwelling on the past." Naomi arched an eyebrow. "Anyone in mind?" Clara hesitated. She thought of James Gallagher, the charismatic business tycoon she'd met at a fundraiser last year. They had shared a few dinners, but she had kept things light. James was magnetic, charming, and, most importantly, respected. "I might have someone," Clara admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. Naomi leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "James Gallagher? Please tell me it's James Gallagher." Clara rolled her eyes, though she couldn't suppress a smile. "We'll see." "Perfect. And the final step?" Naomi asked, gesturing for the waiter to bring another round of drinks. Clara's expression turned serious. I need to be prepared for whatever Elliot throws my way. This isn't just a wedding, it's a stage. He'll want to show off, to prove that he's won. But I'm not playing that game. I'm showing up for me, for the woman I've become. Naomi reached across the table and squeezed Clara's hand. You've already won, Clara. He just doesn't know it yet. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Clara scheduled a fitting at Christian Siriano's studio in the garment district, where the designer himself suggested a sleek crimson gown with a plunging neckline and intricate beadwork. This dress says power, confidence, and a touch of revenge, Siriano said with a wink as Clara admired herself in the mirror. Next came the details. A diamond bracelet from Tiffany Co., a pair of Christian Louboutin heels, and a hairstylist appointment at Frederick Fekkai on Fifth Avenue. Every choice was deliberate, a reflection of the strength she had reclaimed since her divorce. As the day of the wedding approached, Clara felt a mix of nerves and resolve. She knew attending would stir emotions she hadn't faced in years, but she also knew it was time to close this chapter of her life, for good. On the eve of the wedding, Clara sat alone in her living room, a glass of wine in hand. The crimson gown hung nearby, a symbol of the woman she had become. She thought about Elliot, about the life they had shared and the one she had built without him. Her phone buzzed with a message from James. Looking forward to tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 3. Clara smiled, a sense of calm settling over her. She wasn't walking into Elliot's wedding as a scorned ex-wife. She was walking in as Clara Bennett, strong, successful, and unshakable. The chapter closes with Clara standing before her bedroom mirror, holding her head high as she whispers to herself, "This time, I'm writing my own story." This chapter builds the emotional tension and sets the stage for the dramatic confrontation to come, while delving into Clara's motivations and preparations in vivid, realistic detail. The morning of the wedding dawned with a pale, wintry sun breaking through the clouds. Clara stood at her bedroom window, gazing out over the Manhattan skyline. The city pulsed with its usual energy, but for Clara, time seemed to have slowed. Today wasn't just another day, it was a moment she had been building toward since the day she signed her divorce papers. Her thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell's chime. Clara walked to the door and opened it to find Naomi standing there, holding 2 coffee cups and a mischievous grin. "Thought you might need a caffeine boost," Naomi said, stepping inside. She handed Clara a blue bottle coffee cup, setting her oversized tote on the entryway bench. "You know me too well," Clara said, taking a sip and sighing. The warmth of the coffee settled her nerves, if only slightly. Naomi surveyed the apartment, her sharp eyes catching the crimson gown draped carefully over a chair. "Wow," she said, running her fingers lightly over the intricate beadwork. "This is a statement. You're going to turn heads." "That's the idea," Clara replied with a wry smile. "But it's not just about appearances. It's about showing myself that I'm not afraid of the past." Naomi nodded, her expression softening. "You've come so far, Clara. Just remember, this day isn't about him. It's about you." By mid-afternoon, Clara was ready. She stepped into the heels, feeling a surge of confidence as she smoothed down the fabric of the gown. Naomi had left earlier, promising to text updates from the venue. Clara's phone buzzed with a message from James Gallagher. "James, outside whenever you're ready. Take your time, no rush." Clara glanced at herself in the mirror one last time. Her makeup was flawless, a blend of subtle glamour that enhanced her natural beauty. Her hair, styled in soft waves, cascaded over one shoulder. She wasn't just dressed for a wedding, she was dressed for battle. Downstairs, James waited beside his sleek black Mercedes Maybach, looking as polished as ever in a tailored midnight blue suit. He greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes lingering on her as she approached. "Clara," he said, his voice low and admiring, "you look stunning." "Thank you," she replied, a hint of a blush warming her cheeks. "You're not so bad yourself." As they drove toward the venue, James kept the conversation light, sensing her underlying tension. When they pulled up to the Pierre Hotel, its iconic Beaux-Arts facade glimmering in the afternoon light, Clara took a deep breath. "You ready?" James asked, offering her his arm. "Ready as I'll ever be," Clara replied, taking it. The grand ballroom of the Pierre was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the scent of white roses filled the air. Guests mingled, their laughter and conversation blending into a symphony of wealth and privilege. Clara scanned the room, her gaze landing on Elliot almost immediately. He stood near the front of the room, impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his confident posture exuded the arrogance she remembered all too well. Beside him was Sophia, radiant in a gown adorned with Swarovski crystals, her laughter bright but hollow. Clara felt James's reassuring hand on the small of her back as they entered. The room seemed to shift as guests noticed them, whispers spreading like wildfire. Clara Bennett, the ex-wife, had arrived, and she wasn't alone. Elliot's eyes found hers, and for a brief moment his polished facade faltered. He recovered quickly, but Clara caught the flicker of surprise, and something deeper, something almost like regret. Sophia turned, her expression slipping into something closer to irritation than welcome. She whispered something to Elliot, who gave a tight-lipped response before excusing himself and making his way toward Clara. "Clara," Elliot said, his tone carefully neutral. His gaze flicked to James, who stood beside her like a sentinel. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would either," Clara replied smoothly, "but I figured why not? It's not every day you get to see an ex remarry." Elliot chuckled, though the sound lacked humor. "Well, I'm glad you're here. I hope you'll enjoy the evening." James extended a hand, his voice polite but firm. "James Gallagher, Clara's date for the evening." Elliot's expression tightened as he shook James's hand. "Of course, I've heard of you. A rival in the energy sector, if I'm not mistaken." "Competitor," James corrected with a faint smile. "Rivalry implies I'm chasing something. I prefer to stay ahead." The tension between the two men was palpable, but Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she met Elliot's gaze, her voice calm. "You've done well for yourself, Elliot. Congratulations on everything." Elliot opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a commotion at the other end of the room drew their attention. Sophia had spilled a glass of champagne, her frustration visible as she waved over a server. The moment broke whatever hold Elliot had on the conversation, and Clara turned away, her heart steady. As the evening progressed, Clara found herself approached by several guests, many of whom expressed admiration for her work with Bright Horizons. One guest, an older woman in an elegant emerald gown, took Clara's hand and whispered, "You're the real success story in this room, my dear. Don't ever forget that." Clara smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had expected this night to test her resilience, but instead it was reaffirming her worth. Elliot watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he saw Clara not as the woman he had left behind, but as someone who had transcended him entirely. Clara stepping onto the dance floor with James, her laughter light and genuine. As the music swirled around them, she felt something she hadn't in years: freedom. The evening unfolded in a rhythm of toasts, laughter, and clinking glasses, but for Clara it felt like moving through a carefully choreographed play where everyone wore a mask. The grandeur of the event, the shimmering chandeliers, the meticulously arranged white roses, and the glittering attire of the guests only heightened the feeling of artificiality. She couldn't shake the sensation that every glance in her direction carried a whispered question or an unspoken judgment. Standing near the edge of the ballroom, Clara sipped her champagne, the cool liquid grounding her. Beside her, James was effortlessly charming a small circle of guests, weaving humor and wit into their conversation. His presence was a steadying force, but Clara's mind kept drifting to Elliot. She hadn't missed the flicker of something in his eyes when they first saw each other. Regret? Jealousy? It didn't matter, not anymore, or so she told herself. Clara Bennett. The voice was smooth, practiced, and unmistakably familiar. Clara turned to find Elliot standing a few feet away, holding a glass of bourbon. His expression was unreadable, but his posture carried the confidence of a man used to commanding attention. "Elliot," she replied, her voice calm. "Enjoying your big day?" He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's been a memorable evening. I wasn't expecting you to come." "You invited me," Clara pointed out. "What kind of guest would I be if I ignored such a thoughtful gesture?" His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Touché. I'm curious, though. What made you accept?" Clara considered her response. She could have chosen something polite, deflective, but she decided on honesty instead. "To remind myself that I've moved on, and to see if you have." Elliot's smile faltered, just for a moment. He swirled the bourbon in his glass, his gaze dropping to the amber liquid. "I see you've brought quite the date. James Gallagher, of all people. Strategic choice?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "He's a friend, Elliot. Not everything is a calculated move." "Isn't it?" he countered, his tone softer now, almost introspective. "We both know how this world works." She tilted her head, studying him. There was something different about him tonight, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. But before she could respond, the band struck up a lively tune, and Sophia appeared at Elliot's side, her smile tight. "There you are," Sophia said, looping her arm through his. Her gaze flicked to Clara, cool and assessing. "Clara, I'm so glad you could make it. You've certainly been the topic of conversation." Clara met her gaze evenly. "I imagine I have." Sophia's smile widened, though it didn't soften. "Elliot mentioned you're running a non-profit now. Bright Horizons, was it?" "Such noble work." "Yes," Clara replied, her voice steady. "It's been incredibly fulfilling. Helping others has a way of putting things into perspective." Sophia's expression wavered, just for a moment, before she recovered. "How wonderful. We should talk more sometime. I've been considering starting a foundation of my own." Clara smiled, her tone measured. "I'd be happy to share some insights, though I should warn you, it takes more than a name and a checkbook." The subtle barb wasn't lost on Sophia, whose grip on Elliot's arm tightened. "Excuse us," she said with a strained laugh. "We need to check on a few things." Elliot hesitated, his eyes lingering on Clara for a moment, before letting Sophia lead him away. Clara exhaled, the tension ebbing as they disappeared into the crowd. Later that evening, Clara found herself on the balcony, the cool night air, a welcome reprieve from the heat of the ballroom. The city stretched out before her, its lights shimmering like a sea of stars. She leaned against the railing, letting the quiet soothe her. "You were always good at making an exit." Elliot's voice broke the silence. Clara didn't turn, keeping her gaze on the skyline. "Some things never change." He stepped beside her, the faint scent of bourbon and cedarwood cologne wafting in the breeze. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "I wanted to thank you," Elliot said finally. "For what?" "For coming, for showing me." He trailed off, his voice thick with something Clara couldn't quite place. "For showing me that you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." Clara turned to face him, her expression guarded. "Elliot, you don't need to say these things. It's your wedding day." "That's just it," he said, his voice low. "This day, this whole life I've built, it's everything I thought I wanted. But seeing you tonight, hearing people talk about what you've done, I realize something. You found meaning, purpose. I've been chasing, I don't even know what anymore." Clara's heart tightened, but she held her ground. "You made your choices, Elliot, and I made mine. I'm proud of the woman I've become." He nodded, his gaze dropping. "You should be." For a moment, They were just two people standing under the stars, the noise of the world fading into the background. Clara felt a pang of sadness for what they had lost, but also a deep sense of gratitude for what she had gained. "I wish you happiness, Elliot," she said softly. "I truly do." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and something that might have been admiration. "And I wish I had been the man you deserved." As Clara walked back into the ballroom, she felt lighter, as though she had finally set down a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. James was waiting for her, his smile warm and steady. "Everything okay?" he asked, offering her his hand. "More than okay," Clara replied, taking it. They stepped onto the dance floor, the music swelling around them. For the first time in years, Clara felt a profound sense of closure and the freedom to embrace whatever came next. The reception was winding down, the grandeur of the event now muted by the subtle fatigue of its guests. Clara could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The bursts of laughter had softened into murmurs. The lively music had given way to slower, more reflective melodies. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, a glass of champagne in her hand, observing the room with a sense of quiet satisfaction. She wasn't a participant in this spectacle anymore. She was an observer, a woman who had come to witness the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, not for Elliot, but for herself. As Clara considered slipping away, Elliot approached her one final time. His bow tie was slightly loosened, and the sharp edges of his demeanor had softened, replaced by something more vulnerable. He gestured toward the quieter corner of the room, where they could speak without interruption. "I wanted to catch you before you left," he began, his voice lower than before, tinged with exhaustion. Clara raised an eyebrow but followed him, curiosity mingled with the lingering sense of closure she had found on the balcony. "What is it, Elliot?" she asked, her tone measured but not unkind. He hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair. "I've been thinking a lot tonight, about us, about what I let slip away." He looked up at her, and for a moment the polished businessman was gone, replaced by the young man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "I never said it back then, but I'm sorry, Clara. For everything. For the way I treated you, for not appreciating what we had." Clara felt a pang in her chest, not of longing, but of bittersweet acknowledgement. "I've forgiven you, Elliot," she said softly. "I forgave you a long time ago. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that weight wasn't helping me, it was holding me back." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers. "You're incredible, you know that. The things you've accomplished, the way people talk about you tonight. You've become everything I thought I was chasing, but I see now it wasn't about the success. It was about the person behind it." Clara gave him a small smile, the kind that held a world of understanding. "We both had to grow in different ways, Elliot. What we had, it taught me strength, resilience, and it taught me to believe in myself. I wouldn't trade those lessons for anything." He took a deep breath, as if letting go of something he'd held on to for too long. "Thank you, Clara, for being here, for everything. I hope you find the happiness you deserve." "I already have," she replied, her voice steady. "I hope you find it too." They parted with a handshake that felt more like a truce, a final closing of the door on their shared history. As Clara watched him return to the party, she felt no sadness, no regret, only peace. James found her soon after, his presence as grounding as ever. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone gentle but inquisitive. "Better than okay," Clara replied, slipping her arm through his. "It feels like a weight has been lifted." He smiled, nodding toward the exit. "Shall we?" As they left the ballroom, the cool night air greeted them, crisp and refreshing after the heat and noise of the reception. The city lights stretched out before them, vibrant and alive, a reminder that life always moved forward. They walked in companionable silence to the waiting car, the hum of the engine blending with the distant sounds of New York. Clara leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, her thoughts quiet but content. The next morning, Clara sat at her desk, a steaming cup of tea beside her. The sunlight streamed through the windows of her apartment, bathing the room in a warm glow. She opened her laptop and pulled up the draft of her latest article, a personal essay for a prominent magazine that had asked her to write about resilience and reinvention. The words flowed easily now, no longer tinged with the bitterness or uncertainty that had colored her earlier drafts. She wrote about loss and growth, about the unexpected beauty of finding oneself after a storm. And as she typed the final sentences, she realized how far she had come. Later that day, her phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. It was a short message, uncharacteristically simple. "Thank you for coming last night. Seeing you reminded me of what really matters. I hope our paths cross again someday." Clara read the message twice, then smiled before setting her phone down. She didn't feel the need to reply. The conversation they had shared the night before was enough. Weeks later, Clara found herself standing in the lobby of a Manhattan hotel, waiting for James. They were heading to a gala for Bright Horizons, a celebration of the organization's latest achievements. When he arrived, his smile was warm and his hand steady as he led her toward the waiting car. "You ready for another big night?" he teased. "Always," Clara replied, her confidence unshakable. As they drove through the bustling streets of New York, Clara looked out at the city she had come to love so deeply. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, of the woman she had become through struggle, growth, and rediscovery. The chapter ends with Clara stepping out of the car at the gala, her head held high, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life, not as someone defined by her past, but as the author of her own story. The weeks following Elliot's wedding were a time of reflection and quiet transformation for Clara. Each day seemed to carry her further from the shadow of her past and deeper into the light of the life she had built. Her work with Bright Horizons thrived, her personal relationships grew richer, and the weight she hadn't realized she was carrying finally lifted. But this journey wasn't without its pivotal moments, each one a reminder of how far she had come and where she was going. It began with a simple errand. Clara was walking through the Strand bookstore, one of her favorite places in New York City, searching for a first edition to gift a friend. The scent of old paper and the quiet hum of readers flipping pages filled the air, a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. As she browsed the shelves, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Clara?" She turned and froze. Standing just a few feet away was Sophia Reed, Elliot's new wife. Sophia was impeccably dressed, her coat cinched perfectly at the waist, her makeup flawless. But there was an edge to her expression, a crack in her polished demeanor. "Sophia," Clara said, her voice calm but curious. "This is unexpected." Sophia's smile was tight. "I thought so too, but I couldn't let the moment pass. I wanted to apologize." The words hung in the air, unexpected and heavy. Clara arched an eyebrow, but said nothing, letting Sophia continue. "I know how I came across at the wedding," Sophia said, her gaze dropping momentarily. "I was threatened, insecure. You walked in with all this presence, and I felt small. I'm not proud of how I acted." Clara studied her for a moment before replying. "It takes courage to admit that. I appreciate your honesty." Sophia sighed, a hint of vulnerability breaking through. "For what it's worth, I think Elliot realized something that night. He hasn't said much, but there's been a shift. I think seeing you made him reflect on the choices he's made." Clara nodded, a flicker of sympathy passing through her. "We all grow in our own time. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sophia." Sophia looked at her, something close to gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you. And congratulations, by the way, on everything." As Sophia walked away, Clara felt an odd sense of closure, not just with Elliot, but with the entire chapter of her life that had revolved around him. The annual gala for Bright Horizons was one of the biggest nights of the year. Held at the elegant Cipriani Wall Street, the event drew philanthropists, corporate leaders, and public figures eager to support the cause of literacy and education. Clara arrived with James, her crimson gown from Christian Siriano, drawing admiring glances. The evening was a whirlwind of speeches, networking, and heartfelt moments. But the highlight came when Clara was called to the stage to accept an award for her contributions to social impact. Standing at the podium, Clara looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "This recognition isn't just for me, it's for the team that makes Bright Horizons possible, and for every child whose life has been touched by the power of education." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "There was a time when I doubted my ability to create something meaningful, when I felt defined by someone else's vision of success. But what I've learned is that true fulfillment comes from embracing your own path, no matter how uncertain it may seem." The applause that followed was thunderous. James met her at the base of the stage, his smile warm and proud. "You were incredible," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Clara felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not just for the award, but for the journey it represented. She had stepped out of someone else's shadow and built a legacy of her own. A few days after the gala, Clara received a package in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. It was from Elliot. She hesitated for a moment before opening it, her curiosity piqued. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small leather-bound notebook. The letter was brief, but heartfelt. "Clara, I saw the news about the gala and the award. Congratulations. I can't think of anyone who deserves it more. I've been reflecting a lot since the wedding, and I realized there's something I needed to do. Enclosed is the notebook where I used to jot down my ideas during our early days at Boston University. Many of those ideas became the foundation for Grayson Enterprises, but I never acknowledged how much of that journey was shaped by your support, your belief in me. I want you to have it as a reminder that your impact has always been greater than you realized. Wishing you all the happiness in the world." Elliot. Clara traced her fingers over the cover of the notebook, memories flooding back. She felt no longing, only gratitude for the clarity, the growth, and the life she had now. One evening, as Clara and James walked along the High Line, the city lights twinkling around them, James spoke with a rare seriousness. "You've been through so much," he said, taking her hand. "But it's clear you're not just surviving, you're thriving. I'm lucky to be part of your world." Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I'm lucky to have you in mine." Their steps slowed as they reached the edge of the park. Clara looked out at the skyline, feeling the weight of the past lift completely. She had faced the ghosts of her old life, and now she stood on the precipice of a future defined by her own terms. The chapter ends with Clara resting her head on James's shoulder, the city stretching out before them as a symbol of endless possibility. Chapter 7. Writing Her Own Story. The early spring sun bathed New York City in a golden light, its warmth a promise of renewal. Clara stood on the balcony of her Brooklyn Heights apartment, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. Below, the world bustled with its usual energy, but Clara felt a rare sense of calm, as if the city itself had paused to reflect alongside her. She had spent the morning organizing her workspace, finally deciding to frame the letter and notebook Elliot had sent. They weren't tokens of love or longing, but symbols of the growth and clarity she had gained. Her office now held the physical reminders of her journey, a framed photo of her first literacy program ribbon cutting, awards recognizing her nonprofit's impact, and a growing pile of drafts for a memoir she had tentatively titled Finding Horizons. Later that day, Clara sat in a boardroom at the Penguin Random House offices. She had been invited to discuss her memoir with their editorial team, who had taken an interest in her story after her gala speech had gone viral. The editor-in-chief, a poised woman named Rachel Hargrove, leaned forward with a smile. Clara, your story resonates deeply, not just the professional success, but the personal resilience. It's rare to find someone who can inspire with such authenticity. I think Finding Horizons has the potential to reach a wide audience. Clara smiled, humbled by the praise. I've always believed in the power of stories to connect us. If sharing mine can help others find their strength, then it's worth every vulnerable moment. As they discussed the book's direction, Clara felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about sharing her past. It was about reclaiming her narrative and giving it a purpose beyond herself. A few weeks later, Clara hosted a private dinner at Le Bernardin, one of her favorite restaurants, to celebrate the formal launch of her memoir project. Naomi and James were there, along with key members of the Bright Horizons team. It was an intimate gathering, but every guest had played a significant role in Clara's journey. Naomi, ever the life of the party, raised a glass. To Clara, who's proven that strength doesn't come from never falling, but from rising every time. And to her memoir, which I know will inspire millions. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, and Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thank you," she said, standing to address the group. "I wouldn't be here without each of you. You've reminded me that life isn't about the plans we make or the setbacks we face. It's about the people who walk beside us." The following morning, Clara received an unexpected email from Elliot. The subject line was simple: "Thank you. Clara, I read about your memoir project, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. I've started my own journey of reflection, and I've realized how much I can learn from the way you've faced your challenges with grace. I'm also making changes in my life. I've begun mentoring young entrepreneurs, hoping to pass on lessons I wish I'd learned earlier. I owe much of that inspiration to you. Wishing you all the best in this new chapter." Clara read the message twice before closing her laptop. It was strange how life had a way of circling back, offering closure when you least expected it. On a bright Saturday morning, Clara and James drove to the Catskills for a weekend retreat. It was their first real getaway together, a chance to step back from their busy lives and simply be present with one another. As they walked along a forest trail, the sun filtering through the trees, Clara felt a deep sense of peace. James reached for her hand, and she smiled up at him. "You're quiet today," he said gently. "What's on your mind?" "Just thinking about how far I've come," she replied. "For so long, I let myself believe I was defined by what I'd lost. But now I see that every step, even the painful ones, brought me to where I'm meant to be." James stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression soft. "And where is that?" "Here," Clara said, gesturing to the world around them. "Living fully, without fear of the past. Writing my own story." He leaned down and kissed her, the moment filled with the quiet joy of shared understanding. As they continued down the trail, the trees opened up to reveal a breathtaking view of the valley below. Clara paused, taking it all in, the endless horizon stretching before her. For the first time in years, she didn't just feel like a woman who had overcome her past, she felt like a woman who had embraced her future. Back in her Brooklyn apartment, Clara typed the final sentence of the first chapter of her memoir. "The most important journey isn't the one that takes you somewhere new. It's the one that brings you back to yourself." She leaned back, a contented smile on her lips. Her story wasn't over, but she knew now that she was the one holding the pen. The novel ends with Clara gazing out at the city skyline, the soft glow of her desk lamp illuminating her face. Her story was just beginning, and the horizon was limitless. Clara closed her laptop and stood by the large window in her Brooklyn Heights apartment. The city skyline stretched before her, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. She held a cup of tea, her thoughts calm and content. Her journey had been anything but simple, filled with twists, losses, and rediscoveries. But as she stood there, she knew one thing for certain. Life wasn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It was about learning to create those moments, to embrace every high and low, and to keep moving forward with resilience and authenticity. Clara turned, her smile radiant, as if addressing a larger audience beyond the city's glow. If Clara's story inspired you, if it reminded you to embrace your own journey, no matter how challenging, then there's so much more we can share together. Stories have the power to heal, to connect, and to ignite something within us all. Hit that subscribe button now to join a community that believes in resilience, growth, and the beauty of second chances. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that they hold the pen to their own life. Let's keep writing, keep growing, and keep inspiring each other. Together, we'll create stories that change the world. The screen fades to black, but the faint echo of Clara's words lingers, because the best is always yet to come.
Have you ever been so certain of your happiness that the thought of it shattering feels like a scene from a movie, not your own life? I had it all, a loving husband of 8 years, a beautiful home we'd built together, and our first child on the way. I was living the dream. But then a woman I'd never met called me, her voice dripping with pity to inform me that my entire life was a lie. She was his real love, she said, and I was just an obligation. She thought she held all the cards. What she didn't know was that in my husband's world of carefully constructed lies, I was about to play an old recording that would burn it all to the ground. Our house on Maple Creek Lane wasn't just built of wood and stone. It was constructed from 8 years of shared dreams. I, Amelia Hayes, an interior designer by trade, had personally overseen every detail. The warm oak floors, the large bay window in the living room that caught the morning sun, the kitchen island where my husband, Lucas Sterling, would leave me coffee every morning before heading to his high-powered job in finance. Every corner held a memory, a testament to the life we had so carefully curated. At 34 and 7 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter we planned to name Olivia, I felt a sense of profound, settled contentment. Lucas, with his sharp suit's confident smile and the faint scent of expensive cologne, was the architect of our security. He was a partner at a downtown investment firm, a world of high stakes and long hours that I respected and supported. He was my rock, my confidant, my everything. We were that couple, the one our friends pointed to as proof that true, lasting love existed. The first crack in this perfect facade was almost imperceptible. It was a Tuesday night in late May. Lucas came home well past midnight, which wasn't unusual, but the excuse was. The servers crashed downtown, had to work with IT all night to get the trading platforms back online for the Asian markets. He'd mumbled, dropping his briefcase by the door and loosening his tie. I was in bed, propped up by pillows, a book resting on my swollen belly. "Oh, honey, that's awful. Are you hungry? I can heat up the casserole." "No, I'm exhausted. Just need a shower," he said, avoiding my eyes. He kissed my forehead, a fleeting, almost obligatory gesture. As he walked past, a scent wafted over to me. It wasn't his usual Tom Ford cologne. It was something lighter, floral, distinctly feminine. Perfume. I frowned. Maybe he'd been near a female colleague during the IT crisis. Plausible. I told myself to stop being silly. My hormones were making me paranoid. I pushed the thought away, chalking it up to the anxieties of a first-time mother. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, the cracks began to spiderweb. The late nights at the office became more frequent. Phone calls were suddenly taken on the back patio, his voice a low, intimate murmur. When I'd walk by, he'd abruptly change his tone, making it louder, more professional. "Yes, I understand the risk portfolio, Henderson. Send me the updated prospectus." But I'd heard the softer tone that preceded it. He became more attached to his phone than ever, its screen angled away from me with a practiced subtlety. Once he left it on the kitchen counter while he showered. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but a stronger, more desperate curiosity took hold. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked it up. Locked. Facial recognition. Of course, I put it back down, my hand trembling slightly. What was I doing? I was Amelia Hayes, and I trusted my husband. The gaslighting was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. "You seem a bit on edge lately, Ames," he said one evening, rubbing my shoulders as I stood looking out the bay window. "Is the pregnancy getting to you? You know you can talk to me about anything. You've just been so distant, Lucas. So busy." He sighed a long, weary sound. "Honey, I'm closing the biggest deal of my career. This sets us up for life. I'm doing this for us, for Olivia." I thought you understood that. The pressure is immense. The last thing I need is to feel like I'm being interrogated when I come home. He was so convincing. He expertly turned my valid concerns into an attack on his hard work, making me feel selfish and ungrateful. I found myself apologizing. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just being hormonal and emotional. I know you're working hard for us." He smiled, that charming, disarming smile that had made me fall in love with him at a college football game a decade ago. That's my girl. The breaking point came not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a mouse. Lucas was on a 2-day business trip to Chicago. I was organizing our digital files, sorting through years of photos and documents to make space for the torrent of baby pictures to come. I decided to clean up our shared cloud drive, a digital attic filled with old receipts, travel confirmations, and forgotten documents. I clicked on a folder labeled Expense Reports, 2025. Inside were PDF receipts he'd uploaded for work. I was about to close it when my eyes caught on a file name, Receipt Hotel Celeste, 06/04/25. The date was from 3 weeks ago, a night he was supposedly working late at the office. Hotel Celeste wasn't in Chicago. It was a chic boutique hotel in our city, less than 5 miles from his downtown office. My breath hitched. My fingers felt like ice as I double-clicked the file. The PDF opened. A one-night stay, a king suite, and a room service charge that made my blood run cold. Dinner for 2 oysters champagne, a filet mignon, and a chocolate lava cake. Total $342,050. It was a lover's cliché. And underneath another charge from the hotel's gift shop, a Sophie Beale Bras Petite Perle necklace. The name meant nothing to me, but the price tag did $1,250. I had never received such a necklace. I felt the baby kick a sharp, sudden jolt, as if she could sense my distress. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, a primal need to protect her from the poison that was now coursing through my veins. The perfume the late nights, the secret calls it, wasn't paranoia. It was intuition. It was the truth. I sat there in the silent house, the glow of the monitor illuminating my tear-streaked face. The man I had built my world around was a stranger. The foundation of our life wasn't stone. It was sand. And the tide was coming in. I didn't cry for long. The shock quickly morphed into something else. Something cool and hard and sharp. Anger. I wasn't just a hormonal pregnant woman. I was a woman who had been played for a fool, and I would not go down quietly. My mind started working the gears of my past self, the meticulous, detail-oriented designer grinding back to life. He had built a facade. I would be the one to orchestrate its demolition. The next morning I woke up with a chilling clarity. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was now insulated by a layer of cold resolve. I would not confront him. Not yet. A premature confrontation would only lead to more lies, more gaslighting, and a chance for him to cover his tracks. I needed more than a hotel receipt. I needed an airtight case. I needed undeniable, soul-crushing proof. My first call was to my best friend, Sarah Jenkins, a sharp-witted lawyer with a cynical view of the world. Sarah had been my maid of honor and my fiercest protector. Amelia. "You're up early. Everything okay with the baby?" she answered, her voice still thick with sleep. I took a shaky breath. "Sarah, I need you. I think Lucas is having an affair." There was a pause, then the sound of rustling sheets. "I'm on my way. Don't do anything. Don't say anything to him. Just act normal. I'll be there in 20 minutes with coffee and croissants." True to her word, Sarah arrived, her expression a mixture of fury and concern. I laid out the evidence on the kitchen island, the hotel receipt, the timeline of his late nights, the memory of the strange perfume. She listened intently, her lawyer's mind processing every detail. The bastard. She breathed, her knuckles white around her coffee mug. "Amelia, I am so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said, my voice steady. "Be my counsel." "What do I do?" "We dig." Sarah said, her eyes glinting. "We become archaeologists. We're going to unearth every single lie." That afternoon, with Sarah's guidance, I began the grim task of excavating my husband's secret life. The first step was practical. I called our mobile phone provider. Posing as the doting, slightly confused pregnant wife trying to consolidate our family plan, I managed to get a detailed call and text log for the past 6 months sent to my email. "My husband is so busy, he asked me to handle it. But you know how it is with pregnancy brain." I can barely remember my own name. I'd chirped to the customer service agent, a performance that left a bitter taste in my mouth. The call log was a treasure map of deceit. There was one number that appeared with startling frequency. Dozens of calls, often late at night. Hundreds of texts. The calls were long, sometimes over an hour. I Googled the number. It was a mobile phone, no name attached. Next, the credit cards. I had access to our joint accounts. I meticulously went through months of statements cross-referencing dates with Lucas's work calendar. There were charges for dinners at intimate restaurants I'd never been to, flower deliveries to an address in a trendy downtown condo building, and payments to a high-end lingerie boutique. The Sophie Bille Brahe necklace from the hotel receipt now had context. It was all there, a digital breadcrumb trail of his betrayal. The final piece was the most painful. I needed a face, a name. Sarah, with her access to legal databases, ran the phone number. A hit. Chloe Reed. Sarah said over the phone, her voice grim. Age 26. Lives at the address where the flowers were sent. She's a junior financial analyst at Matheson & Co., one of the firms Lucas's company works with on the big merger deal. Chloe Reed. The name felt like a physical blow. I typed it into the search bar of Instagram. Her profile was public. My heart pounded as her life flashed before me on the screen. She was beautiful in a youthful, effervescent way that felt like a direct contrast to my own settled maternal state. There were pictures of her with friends, clinking champagne glasses on rooftop bars. There were photos of her in exotic locations that perfectly matched Lucas's business trips. A weekend in Miami in April. Best surprise getaway, a week in London in February. Feeling like the luckiest girl in the world. And then I saw it. A photo posted 3 weeks ago. It was a close-up of her neck and collarbone, showcasing a delicate pearl necklace. The Sophie Biel Brahe. The caption read, "Sometimes you meet a person and you just know that they are your person." My heart is so full. I scrolled further. Cryptic posts about a love that was complicated, but worth it. A picture of 2 wine glasses with the caption, "Celebrating our future." In the reflection of one of the glasses, I could just make out the blurred silhouette of a man in a suit. Lucas. I felt a wave of nausea so intense, I had to grip the edge of my desk. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was a parallel life. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had built a completely separate world with this woman. A world where he was a romantic hero sweeping her off her feet. He was funding her lifestyle, her apartment, her happiness with the money he claimed to be earning for our family, for our daughter. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered into the nursery. The crib was assembled, the walls painted a soft shade of lavender. Tiny clothes were folded in the dresser. This room, once a symbol of our shared future, now felt like a stage for a tragic play. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of nostalgia for a time when I believed in our story, I opened my laptop again, not to look for more evidence, but for comfort. I navigated to my personal cloud storage to a folder I hadn't opened in years, simply labeled Memories. It was filled with old photos from college scans of love letters and short video clips from our early days. And then I saw the file Proposal Audio 05/12/2017 4A. My breath caught. I had completely forgotten about it. On the night he proposed during a picnic under the stars at our favorite spot overlooking the city, I had been so overwhelmed with emotion that I had surreptitiously hit the record button on my phone, wanting to capture his words forever. I had saved the audio file and forgotten all about it. My finger hovered over the play button. Did I really want to hear this? Did I want to hear the voice of the man I thought I was marrying, knowing what I knew now? With a sense of morbid curiosity, I clicked. Lucas's voice, younger, clearer, and filled with an earnestness that tore at my heart, filled the silent room. Amelia Hayes. The recording began his voice, thick with emotion. From the moment I saw you arguing with Professor Albright about Keynesian economics, I knew I was in trouble. You were brilliant and fierce, and you didn't even know I existed. For the last 2 years, you haven't just been my girlfriend. You've been my home. Everything I do, every ambition I have, it's all just a different path leading back to you. You are my compass, my anchor, my one and only truth in this world. There is no version of my life, no possible future that makes any sense without you in it. I love you more than I know how to say. So I'm asking you, will you make my life complete? Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. I listened to my own choked sob on the recording, my whispered yes. It was the most beautiful, heartfelt declaration of love I had ever heard, and it was all a lie. Or was it? He must have meant it then. What had changed? Did it even matter? The man on that recording was dead. In his place stood a hollow stranger who spoke of risk portfolios and loved another woman. But as the audio file finished, the grief was replaced by a surge of electrifying power. I didn't just have credit card statements and phone logs anymore. I had his own words. I had his soul captured in an audio file from a time when he presumably still had one. This recording wasn't a painful memory. It was a weapon, and I knew exactly when and how I was going to use it. The plan began to form in my mind, intricate and precise, like one of my own design blueprints. A simple confrontation was beneath the scale of his betrayal. Exposing him to just me would allow him to wriggle free to spin more tales. No, the demolition had to be public. It had to be witnessed. The pillars of his carefully constructed life-family reputation, success, all had to come crashing down at once. The perfect stage presented itself a week later. His parents, Robert and Carol Sterling, were coming to town. They were lovely people, a classic old-money couple from Connecticut, who adored me and were ecstatic about their first grandchild. They had called to arrange a visit specifically to see the nursery and celebrate with us. Lucas, ever the devoted son, suggested we host a small family dinner at our house the following Saturday. Just us and my parents, he'd said, smiling at me over breakfast. A little celebration for Olivia before she arrives. We can show them everything you've done with the nursery. They'll be so thrilled. It was perfect. The ultimate audience. His adoring parents who saw him as the golden boy who could do no wrong. I spent the week preparing not just for the dinner, but for the performance of my life. I was the perfect, glowing, expectant mother. I discussed menu options with Lucas, feigned excitement about his parents' visit, and played the role of the happy, oblivious wife. Inside, I was a coiled spring of ice and fury. Every smile I gave him, every loving touch I accepted, felt like a betrayal of myself, but it was a necessary evil. I was setting the trap, and the bait had to be convincing. The day before the dinner, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, the same number I had traced to Chloe Reed. My heart leaped into my throat. I had expected to have to orchestrate this part of the confrontation myself, but it seemed my husband's arrogance was about to do the work for me. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing my voice to sound calm, slightly questioning. Hello. Is this Amelia? The voice on the other end was young, confident, and laced with an infuriating note of condescending pity. It is. Who's calling? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. My name is Chloe Reed. She paused as if expecting the name to shatter me. I think we need to talk. About Lucas. Here it was. The moment I had been dreading and anticipating. I walked into the nursery and sat in the rocking chair, my hand resting on my belly. Okay, Chloe. I'm listening. Look, I don't want to do this over the phone, and I know this must be hard for you to hear, especially in your condition, she said the word dripping with disdain. But you need to know the truth. Lucas and I are in love. He loves me. What he has with you is an obligation, a history. He was going to tell you, but he's been waiting for the right time after the baby is born. He doesn't want to cause you undue stress. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. This girl fed a diet of Lucas's lies, truly believed she was the heroine of this story, and I was the tragic, clueless wife. He had probably told her I was emotionally unstable, that our marriage was one of convenience. He had painted a masterpiece of deception, and she was its primary subject. He told me he's only staying with you out of guilt. She continued, her voice gaining momentum. He said your marriage has been over for years, that you're more like roommates. He doesn't love you, Amelia. He's with me. You deserve to know that your whole life is a sham. I listened, letting her empty her arsenal of rehearsed lines. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange glacial calm settled over me. He told you all that I asked my voice soft. Yes. He wants to be with me, to build a real life, a life based on passion and real love, not just history. Passion. Real love. The phrases sounded so hollow, so cliché. They were the lines of a man trying to convince a naive young woman and himself that his betrayal was something noble. An idea bold and terrifying sparked in my mind. This was better than I could have planned. Chloe. I said, my voice now laced with a believable manufactured fragility. I don't know what to say. He's been working so hard. He's been so stressed. I thought we were happy. I let a small, pathetic sob escape my lips. It worked. Her tone softened slightly. I'm sorry. I know this is a shock, but it's better you know now. I need to see you. I said the words, tumbling out as if in a panic. I need to talk to you face to face. I can't believe this unless I hear it from you in person. There was a moment of hesitation on her end. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, I begged, pouring every ounce of fake desperation I could muster into my voice. Tomorrow, come to my house. Lucas is having his parents over for a small dinner. They'll be here around 7. If you could come around 8, he'll be here. We can all talk this out. Like adults, it was a gamble, a huge one. I was inviting the viper into my nest, but I was counting on her ego. I was counting on her belief that she was the real love, and that her presence would force the issue, forcing Lucas to finally choose her in front of his family. To a 26-year-old who believed she was in a grand romance, it would be an irresistible, cinematic moment. You want me to come to your house while his parents are there? She asked, a note of surprise in her voice. Yes, I whispered. I want to see the way he looks at you. I need to see if it's real. Then I'll know, and I can let him go. Another pause. I could almost hear the calculations in her head, the fantasy playing out. She would arrive, the beautiful, honest truth-teller, exposing the loveless marriage and claiming her man. Okay, she finally said, her voice firm again, full of renewed conviction. Okay, Amelia, I'll be there. 8 o'clock. She hung up. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline. The stage was set. The actors had been summoned. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. I stood up and walked out of the nursery, leaving the ghosts of the past and the lies of the present behind me. Tomorrow I wouldn't be the victim. I would be the director. The evening of Saturday, August 1st, descended upon Maple Creek Lane with a breathtaking, fraudulent tranquility. The air in our home was thick with the savory aroma of rosemary roasted chicken and garlic potatoes, a scent I had always associated with comfort and celebration. The dining table, our grand oak centerpiece, was set for 5, with the gleaming Wedgwood china we reserved for Christmas and landmark anniversaries. I had polished the silver myself that afternoon, each methodical stroke a meditation, a preparation for battle. In the center, a bouquet of white tulips stood in a crystal vase, their pristine petals illuminated by the soft, flickering glow of a dozen candles. I had chosen them for their symbolism of forgiveness, a final secret act of irony that was for me alone. I moved through my home, a serene hostess, in a simple navy blue maternity dress that accentuated the proud swell of my belly. My hair was swept into a neat chignon, my makeup minimal. To any observer, I was the very picture of placid maternal contentment. On the inside, however, I was a coiled spring, a general surveying the battlefield just moments before sounding the charge. Every nerve ending was alight, every sense heightened. My composure was a dam, holding back a reservoir of cold, calculated fury. Lucas, my husband, was magnificent in his ignorance. He thrived in this atmosphere, effortlessly slipping into the role of the proud, adoring husband and expectant father. He was dressed in a crisp shirt and tailored trousers, looking every bit the successful man of the house. He complimented the aroma of the food, he rubbed my lower back with a proprietary air of affection, and he regaled his parents with tales of his latest triumphs at the firm. He was a master performer, completely cocooned in the impenetrable arrogance of a man who believes he is the sole author of his own reality. His parents, Robert and Carol Sterling, arrived precisely at 7, their faces beaming with undisguised joy. They were a handsome, distinguished couple from old Connecticut, money radiating an aura of quiet elegance and genuine warmth. Carol, smelling faintly of Chanel No. 5, enveloped me in a gentle, cautious hug, her perfectly manicured hand coming to rest on my stomach. "Amelia, my dear, you are simply glowing," she cooed, her eyes sparkling. "Motherhood suits you so beautifully." "She's a natural," Lucas interjected, draping a heavy arm around my shoulders, his thumb stroking my arm. "Handling everything like an absolute champion while I'm chained to my desk, closing these impossible deals. I don't know what I'd do without her." I smiled up at him, a placid, loving expression I had practiced in the mirror. Inside, I thought, "You have no idea what you're about to do without me. We are just so incredibly proud of you both." Robert added his voice, a deep, reassuring baritone, as he clapped Lucas on the back. He looked around the living room, his gaze sweeping over the custom bookshelves and the art we had collected. "Building such a beautiful home, a strong family. You've done well for yourself, son. Very well." The 4 of us settled in the living room, the heart of our home, the room where Lucas had sworn his love to me countless times. I served his parents wine and poured myself a glass of sparkling cider, the sweet bubbles a mockery of the bitter acid churning in my stomach. The conversation flowed easily, a gentle river of pleasantries. They asked about my health, about the baby's movements, about our plans for the nursery. Lucas dominated the conversation, of course, pivoting back to his work, to the immense pressure he was under, subtly reinforcing the narrative of his sacrifice for our family. "It's the final push on the Matheson merger," he explained, swirling the deep red liquid in his glass. "The due diligence is a killer, but integrity is everything in our business. One slip, one ethical lapse, and the whole house of cards comes down. You have to be beyond reproach." The hypocrisy was so potent, I could almost taste it. I simply nodded, playing the part of the supportive, slightly bored wife, while my mind catalogued his words, filing them away as further evidence. At their request, I gave them the grand tour of the nursery upstairs. Carol teared up at the sight of the assembled crib and the tiny dresses hanging in the closet. "Oh, it's just perfect, Amelia. Absolutely perfect. To think our first grandchild will be sleeping here so soon." Lucas stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, with a look of paternal pride so convincing it was chilling. He spoke of the future of teaching his daughter to throw a baseball, of walking her down the aisle one day. He was building a fantasy of the future, even as I was preparing to incinerate his present. We returned downstairs, the hands on the grandfather clock in the hall, ticking relentlessly, audibly, towards 8 o'clock. Each tick was a drumbeat, counting down the seconds to detonation. At 5 minutes to 8, I excused myself. "I'll just check on the chicken and bring in the first course," I announced with a smile. Lucas followed me into the warm, fragrant kitchen. "Everything is perfect, Ames," he whispered, cornering me between the counter and the island. He leaned in and kissed the top of my head, his cologne, the familiar Tom Ford scent, filling my senses. It was the scent of our life together, the scent of a lie. "My parents absolutely adore you. You know that, right? I love you so much." I looked up into his handsome, familiar face, the face I had loved since I was a girl, the face of a complete stranger. A profound, hollow sadness washed over me, a final pang of grief for the man I thought he was. I manufactured a soft smile. "I know, Lucas." We sat down at the beautifully appointed table. The candlelight danced across our faces, casting long, dramatic shadows. Lucas at the head of the table raised his glass. His face was alight with genuine happiness, a man wholly pleased with his life and his own performance in it. "I'd like to make a toast," he began, his voice resonating with sincerity. "To my incredible parents, Robert and Carol. Thank you for your endless love and for being the bedrock of our family. And to my amazing, beautiful wife, Amelia." He turned his beaming face to me. "My rock, the love of my life. You've given me a life better than I ever could have imagined, and now you're giving me the greatest gift of all. Our next chapter with little Olivia is going to be the best one yet. I can't wait to live it with you. To family. To family." Robert and Carol echoed, their faces glowing with pride and affection, as their crystal glasses clinked together in a harmonious chime. A sharp, discordant sound cut through the warmth. The doorbell rang. The sound was jarring an electric shock to the placid atmosphere. A flicker of genuine confusion crossed Lucas's face. He lowered his glass. "Are we expecting someone else?" "No," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of mild surprise. I calmly placed my linen napkin on the table beside my plate. "I'll get it." My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my movements were fluid and unhurried. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished oak floor. Every eye was on me as I walked from the dining room, through the living room, and into the foyer. The house was silent save for the ticking of the clock. I felt like an actress walking onto a stage, every sense on high alert. I reached the heavy front door, my hand steady as I wrapped it around the cool, solid brass knob. I took one final deep, fortifying breath and pulled the door inward. There, bathed in the soft yellow light of the porch lamp, stood Chloe Reed. She was exactly as I had pictured her from her Instagram profile, though in person her ambition felt more palpable, more desperate. She wore a stylish black dress that was just a little too tight, her makeup a little too heavy for a quiet family dinner. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she held her chin high, but I could see the nervous tremor in her hands. Her eyes, wide and determined, darted past me, fixing on the domestic tableau in the dining room. From the corner of my eye, I saw Lucas. He had risen halfway from his chair, his body frozen in a strange, contorted posture. Every drop of blood had drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, ghostly white. His mouth hung slightly open. His toast, forgotten his expression, one of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked like a man who had just seen his own executioner walk through the door. Robert and Carol simply looked on, their faces etched with polite confusion. "Chloe," Lucas stammered, his voice a strangled whisper that barely carried across the room. What in God's name are you doing here?" Chloe ignored him completely. Her performance was not for him. It was for his parents and for me. She took a purposeful step across the threshold, bringing the faint floral scent of her perfume, the ghost scent from his shirts, into my home. Her gaze filled with a potent cocktail of pity and resolve landed on me before sweeping towards the Sterlings. "Hello?" she began, her voice shaking almost imperceptibly, but fortified with rehearsed conviction. "I am so terribly sorry to interrupt your dinner. My name is Chloe Reed." She took another deliberate step into the room, forcing Lucas to stumble backward. I know this is a truly awful way for us to meet Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, but I could not in good conscience allow this deception to continue for another moment. Lucas finally found his voice, a strangled, panicked hiss. "Chloe, this is wildly inappropriate. This is not the time or the place." "It's never the right time for the truth, is it, Lucas?" she retorted, her confidence surging as she saw his panic. She turned her full attention back to his stunned parents, her voice softening into a tone of pained sincerity. "I'm here because Lucas and I are in love, deeply in love. He was going to leave Amelia. He's been agonizing over how to tell you both. He's only been staying with her out of a sense of duty, a sense of guilt because of the baby. But his heart, his future, that's with me." A sharp, audible gasp escaped from Carol Sterling. Her hand flew to her chest, as if to physically keep her heart from breaking. Robert's face, once warm and proud, was hardening into a mask of granite. "Lucas, what is the meaning of this?" Robert demanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "She's lying," Lucas sputtered, finally lashing out his eyes wide with frantic desperation. He began to invent, to weave a new lie on the spot. She's a junior analyst from a partner firm. She developed an unhealthy fixation on me. I tried to let her down gently, but she's been harassing me. She's unstable, Amelia, honey. Tell them this is completely insane." Every head in the room swiveled to me. I had remained silent, a calm island in a hurricane of chaos. I let the silence stretch, letting his frantic, pathetic lies hang in the air and rot. Chloe looked smugly triumphant. Lucas looked at me with pleading eyes, begging me to validate his lie to save him. I finally moved. I walked slowly, deliberately to the head of the dining table, to the spot where Lucas had stood just minutes before, toasting our love. I looked at Chloe, my expression not one of anger, but of a kind of clinical pity. "You believe you're his real love?" I asked, my voice slicing through the tension, clear and steady. "He told you our marriage was a loveless obligation, that he didn't love me." "Yes," Chloe said, her chin jutting out defiantly. "He told me everything." "I see," I said, nodding slowly. "The thing about Lucas, you see, is that he tells many stories. He is a wonderful storyteller. He told you a story of a tragic, trapped man finding his soulmate. It's a beautiful story. I'm sure in those moments when he was telling it to you, he was incredibly convincing." I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out my phone. My hand did not tremble. My eyes locked with Lucas's. The terror that had been simmering in them all evening now boiled over into pure, abject dread. He knew what was coming. "Lucas," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, which only made it sound more menacing. "You seem to have forgotten some of the other stories you've told. It's so hard to keep them all straight, isn't it? Let me help you remember one of them." With a few deliberate taps on the screen, I connected my phone to the Sonos speaker system that we had installed throughout the house. A small blue light on the speaker in the living room blinked once, signifying the connection. A moment of pristine, perfect silence hung in the air, a collective held breath. And then a voice filled the room. His voice. Younger, clearer, aching with an earnestness that was now grotesque in its sincerity. "Amelia Hayes." The recording began, his voice thick with raw, unfiltered emotion. From the moment I saw you arguing with Professor Albright about Keynesian economics, I knew I was in trouble. You were brilliant and fierce, and you didn't even know I existed. For the last 2 years, you haven't just been my girlfriend. You've been my home. Everything I do, every ambition I have, it's all just a different path leading back to you. You are my compass, my anchor, my one and only truth in this world. There is no version of my life, no possible future, that makes any sense without you in it. I love you more than I know how to say. So I'm asking you, will you make my life complete? Will you marry me? The audio played out each word, a spectral bullet from the past, tearing through the tissue of his present-day lies. When the recording ended with the sound of my own tearful whispered door, "Yes," the silence that crashed down upon the room was absolute, profound, and devastating. I watched Chloe's face. It was a slow-motion demolition. The defiant confidence shattered, first replaced by confusion, then by a flicker of dawning comprehension, and finally by the vacant, hollow-eyed horror of complete and utter realization. The romantic words he had whispered to her, the promises of a future, she understood now that they were not original. She was not his one great love. She was an echo, an affair built on plagiarized lines and recycled sentiment. Then I looked at my husband. Lucas was a husk. The color had not returned to his face. He was a portrait in shades of gray. His shoulders were slumped, his body seemingly having collapsed in on itself. He was utterly exposed, stripped naked by his own words, haunted and condemned by the ghost of a better man. Carol was weeping openly now, quiet, heartbroken sobs shaking her entire body as she stared at her son with revulsion. Robert was perfectly still, his face like a stone carving his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Finally, I turned my gaze back to the two of them, the architect of this ruin and his last failed project. "The difference between you and me, Chloe," I said, my voice resonating with a power I never knew I possessed, "is that when I was told a story, I was smart enough to keep the receipts. And the difference between the man on that recording and the man standing in this room," I said, my eyes boring into my husband's, "is that one of them had a soul." I took a deep, cleansing breath, the first truly easy breath I had taken in months. I was no longer a victim in their story. I was the author of its ending. "Now both of you get out of my house." Chloe was the first to break. The silence left by the echo of my husband's recorded voice was too heavy for her flimsy confidence to bear. A choked, guttural sob ripped from her throat, a sound of utter humiliation. Her carefully constructed fantasy had been publicly, brutally dismantled. She didn't look at Lucas. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were wild, unseeing as she spun around and fled her stylish heels, clattering a frantic, desperate rhythm on the oak floors and down the stone steps of the front porch. The sound faded into the night, leaving a void that was somehow more damning than the confrontation itself. Lucas remained a statue carved from ash and disbelief. His entire world had just detonated, and he was standing at its epicenter, his eyes stripped of their usual confident sparkle, finally found mine. They were begging, pleading for a lifeline, for a hint of the forgiving Amelia he had known and so expertly manipulated for years. "Amelia," he began, his voice a hoarse, broken thing. I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like." Before another lie could form on his lips, Robert Sterling's voice cut through the air like a sheet of ice. "No, The single word was delivered with such quiet, absolute authority that Lucas flinched as if struck. "You cannot explain this. You will not try. You will not say another word to this woman." Robert, who I had only ever known as a jovial, warm-hearted patriarch, now looked like a wrathful god. He rose from his chair, his movements stiff with a rage that seemed to vibrate in the very air around him. He walked not to me, but to his son, stopping a foot away. His face was a mask of cold fury and profound disappointment. "We raised you to be a man of honor." Robert said, his voice low and trembling with suppressed fury. "We taught you that your word was your bond. We celebrated this marriage. We welcomed this wonderful woman into our hearts as our own daughter, and you have desecrated all of it. You have not only destroyed your marriage and brought shame upon your wife as she carries your child, but you have also disgraced the name of Sterling. I have never in my 70 years been more ashamed than I am in this moment looking at you." He did not shout. He did not need to. Each word was a perfectly aimed blow, landing with devastating precision. Lucas visibly shrank under the weight of his father's condemnation, his head bowing in the first genuine display of shame I had seen all night. Carol, her face pale and streaked with mascara, came to my side. She bypassed her son as if he were a piece of furniture, taking my hand in both of her trembling ones. "Amelia, my dear girl," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "There are no words. There are no apologies deep enough to cover this sin. You are our family. Please, whatever happens, know that you are still our family. What he has done, it is unforgivable." She squeezed my hand, a silent promise of allegiance, before turning to her husband. "Robert, let's go. We cannot stay here." Robert gave a curt nod, his gaze still fixed on Lucas with utter contempt. "You will hear from me tomorrow," he stated, a clear threat hanging in the air. Then he turned his back on his son, a gesture of finality more powerful than any argument. He and Carol walked out of the house, closing the door softly behind them, leaving Lucas and me alone in the cathedral of our ruined life. The silence that descended was suffocating. Lucas finally dared to move toward me, his hand outstretched, a pathetic, pleading gesture. "Ames, please, don't listen to them. Listen to me. We can fix this. I swear we can go to counseling. It was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake. She meant nothing." I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt nothing. The love, the anger, the pain, it had all been cauterized, leaving behind only a sterile, cold clarity. "A mistake, Lucas," I said, my voice eerily calm. "A mistake is taking the wrong turn on the highway. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This wasn't a mistake. This was a project. You managed it with the same meticulous detail you apply to your financial portfolios. You compartmentalized. You lied. You created an entirely separate life, funded by the trust I gave you freely. You built a narrative for her, where I was the villain, and a narrative for me, where you were the hero. That isn't a mistake. That is a masterpiece of deception." He flinched, the word project hitting its mark. "No, I love you. I always have. That recording, that was real. That was me. Yes, it was." I agreed, a sad, bitter smile touching my lips. "And that's the tragedy. I think you even believe that right now. But that man is gone. You killed him with 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000 lies. You want to fix this as you can't fix something that you have systematically ground into dust. The only thing you've managed to fix tonight is my eyesight. For the first time in a very long time, I see you clearly." I turned my back on him just as his father had done and walked away. I didn't run. I walked up the stairs, each step feeling impossibly heavy, as if I were wading through water. I went into the nursery, the one room that was supposed to be about the future, and closed the door. The lock clicking shut was the signal for my own facade to crumble. My body began to shake uncontrollably. I slid down the wall, my hands clutching my belly, and I wept. It wasn't the loud, theatrical sobbing of a tantrum. It was a deep, silent, body-racking grief for a death. The death of my marriage, the death of the man I loved, the death of the future I had so happily and naively planned. I mourned the loss of our shared jokes, the comfortable silences, the decade of memories now irrevocably tainted. In that moment, the baby kicked a strong, definitive thump against my hand. It was an anchor in the storm, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone, a reminder that my life was not in fact over. It was about to begin, in a way I had never imagined. The next morning, Sarah was at my door with coffee and a lawyer's ferocity. The divorce proceedings were swift and merciless. With Sarah as my advocate, and with the mountain of evidence I had collected, the phone logs, the credit card statements, the hotel receipts, and the sworn affidavits from his own parents. About the events of that night, Lucas had no ground to stand on. He was advised to concede to every one of my demands. The house, a significant portion of his assets, and a generous child support agreement were settled without a fight. Within a week on a day, I made sure to be out of the house. He moved his things. I returned to find empty spaces in the closet and gaps on the bookshelves. But the house felt lighter, cleaner, as if a poison had been purged from its very walls. The fallout for Lucas was catastrophic. His firm, terrified of the reputational damage, didn't fire him, but they did something far more humiliating. They moved him to a windowless office in the compliance department, a gilded cage where his sterling charm was useless. His career trajectory flatlined. His parents, true to their word, maintained a frosty distance, their support now directed solely towards me and their unborn grandchild. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe had vanished. Her social media was deleted, her number disconnected. She had resigned from her job and moved back to Ohio. Her ambition and her heart broken, a casualty of a war she never truly understood. She was fighting. My own war was with the ghosts in my house. The silence was a constant companion. To combat it, I began a methodical process of reclamation. I hired painters, and with a strange sense of liberation, rolled gallons of warm, sunny yellow paint over the cool, sophisticated grey Lucas, and I had chosen for our bedroom. I sold the dining table, unable to look at it without replaying that horrible night. In its place, I bought a small, round, antique table, perfect for just me and a high chair. I started therapy, learning to untangle the web of gaslighting that had made me doubt my own intuition for so long. It was an exorcism not just of a man, but of the version of myself who had been his willing audience. 2 months later, with Sarah holding one of my hands and a nurse holding the other, I gave birth to a perfect 7-pound baby girl. As they laid her on my chest, her tiny face scrunched and her cry filling the room, I felt a wave of love so fierce and absolute it knocked the breath out of me. I looked at her, this tiny, innocent soul, who was half me and half a man I no longer knew, and I knew I couldn't name her Olivia. That name belonged to the ghost of my old life. I looked at her again at the unwritten future in her eyes, and I thought about the unearned forgiveness Lucas had expected and the state of being I now craved for myself. "Her name is Grace," I whispered. A year later, the house on Maple Creek Lane was a different place. The silence was gone, replaced by the joyful shrieks of a toddler discovering the world, the sound of cartoons on the television, and the music I played loudly while I cooked. My interior design business, which I had put on the back burner, was now thriving. My portfolio was filled with homes I had helped other families create, each project a testament to my own resilience. One sunny afternoon, I stood in my kitchen, watching Grace chase butterflies in the backyard. She stumbled, fell onto the soft grass, and looked up at me with a pout that quickly melted into a giggle. In that moment, watching my happy, fearless daughter in the yard of our home, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The demolition of my old life hadn't been an ending. It had been a clearing. It had been the painful, necessary raising of a beautiful but unstable structure to make way for something smaller, perhaps, but infinitely more real and built on a foundation of unshakable truth. I was no longer a wife. I was a mother, a business owner, a survivor, a creator. I was whole, not because someone completed me, but because I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. That's where my story ends, but it's also where my new life began. It's a harsh reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of the deepest betrayals. But it's also a story about finding strength in the absolute worst moments. My husband and his mistress thought they were rewriting my life, but they only gave me the pen to write a much better chapter. One of independence, resilience, and a love for my daughter that is more real than any lie he ever told. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight your way out of the darkness and find your own strength, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and reclaiming your power. Remember, you are the author of your own story. Make it a masterpiece